Hi Year 12, I hope you're all okay. I'm just making this video to help you revise through your religious topic and get you set up on the next section of the course, which is the Glorious Revolution. So hopefully you finished off your work on religion. And just as a reminder, there's three parts to that. The first part is about the Anglican Church, and it's important to remember there that there's the changing nature of the church through the different periods of time. So at the beginning of the 17th century, you've got from 1625 King Charles I, and he's got his Arminian influence over the Church of England. It is a Protestant church, it's an Anglican church, but it's got that Arminian influence, which causes a lot of problems. So you've got people like William Laud, William Juxon, Richard Montague, and all of those Arminian churchmen, statesmen, sort of politicians, and you've got that merging of the church and state, which people opposed so much. You then get, from 1640, that change where you've got the Long Parliament coming in and you have the change towards a Presbyterian structure. And at that stage, you have a shift away from that slightly more Catholic style of religion towards a more Protestant, Puritan style of religion. So that's when they try to set up a Scottish-style Presbyterian church. It's opposed by the independents, but they do end up setting up a Presbyterian-style church. So they get rid of the bishops and they set up a much flatter structure. So remember those triangles that I was drawing on the board? So they get rid of the bishop structure, the episcopal structure. That carries on then through the interregnum, and it's not until 1660 with the restoration of the monarchy that you also get the restoration of the bishops. So they re-establish the House of Lords, they re-establish the monarchy, and they re-establish the bishop structure. You've got the Savoy House Conference, which is where they have that debate and they basically start to reinstate the Arminian, or as it's now known, the Laudian style of church, named after William Laud. And Gilbert Sheldon then reinstates that and reimposes that with the Cavalier Parliament. So you get a real shift back towards that stricter Arminian style of church, which is much more persecuting of the Puritans. So that goes a shift back towards the harsher style. And then Charles II and James II both try to challenge that and try to introduce more tolerance, but the Parliament goes against it. So by the end of this century, or by 1688, when James is pushed off the throne in the Glorious Revolution, you have still got technically a confessional state, which is a national state church, which everyone has to adhere to. Everyone officially has to follow that religion. But actually, by 1688, there is quite a lot of dissent in the country, which is the non-conformists, or the people that are not attending and following the official state religion. So that's something we're going to come back to in the Glorious Revolution, this idea of dissenters and whether the confessional state did exist or not after that period of time. So hopefully you've gone through your notes and you've made notes on the Anglican Church, you've made notes on the Catholics through that period of time, and the dissenters through that time as well. So you should have a set of notes on each of those using the stuff that's been on Insight, and you should have an overview grid, which is one A3 sheet, which you should have filled in with a summary of all of those. And then you can do some revision of that, and there's an essay to do as well, which hopefully you've made a start on, and you can contact your teacher if you're not sure about how to do that. So that's what you should have done so far. That's a bit of a recap. And then what we're going to move on to next is the last section of the Britain course, which is about the Glorious Revolution. So we've done a bit of an introduction to this when we did James. It happens in 1688. People are unhappy about James II because he's Catholic, because his second wife, has just given birth to a son. So he's got now a Catholic heir who will take precedence over his two daughters, Mary and Anne, who would have taken over the throne after his death. And they were both Protestant. So people panic, they want to challenge him, and so they write the letter, the Immortal Seven write to William, inviting him over to invade England. They don't write to him offering him the throne, but that's kind of the intention, is that they want him to come over to invade, to get rid of James, and then that was the plan, was to offer it to William and Mary together, because Mary technically is next in line if we discount James's son. But they wanted William to rule with her. So that's the next section that you're going to be studying. And this section of the course is really different to the others, because unlike the other 4 chapters, which are all just knowledge-based, this one is about different interpretations and viewpoints. So what you'll have to do is you're going to look at the knowledge first, and there's 4 sections, but they're much shorter than the rest, so you do 1 each week. And then for each one, you'll have little extracts by historians to read, and there's debates surrounding each one. So I'm going to talk you through that as an introduction today, and then there's going to be a PowerPoint as well on Inset that you can have a look at that talks you through what I'm going to go through today. So the focus of this section is the question, how revolutionary in the years to 1701 was the Glorious Revolution of 1688 to 89? So it's a question about how revolutionary it was. Did it really change things, or did it not change very much? So if you go onto that PowerPoint, it's called Glorious Revolution Intro. There are a couple of slides showing you the family tree, so you can see how William and Mary linked to the rest of the family. William is not only Mary's husband, but he has also got royal blood through Charles I, who was his grandfather as well. So they're actually first cousins. So he's got his own royal bloodline and he's married to Mary. And then if you look on the next family tree, you can see the line of succession. So I've highlighted in yellow the ones that became the kings and queens. And you can see how it transfers from James to his daughter Mary and Anne. And then it would have gone across, you can see in a different branch of the family, to Sophia of Hanover, but she actually dies and it goes to her son George next, and then it carries on down that Hanoverian line afterwards. So that's just a bit of an introduction to who's who, and you can see on the family tree some of the key people. So there's 4 sections to this course, and there's kind of 4 key debates that you need to look into. In the book, they're, I think, in a slightly different order, but we're going to do them in the order that I talk you through now. So the first one you're going to look at is the significance of the revolutionary ideas in terms of establishing a constitutional monarchy. So what that means is a monarchy which is basically in line with and working closely with the Parliament, not just the monarch ruling and having the ultimate power, as, for example, Charles I did. So the question and debate surrounding that is, did the monarch maintain control in the country, or had that power shifted away from them and to Parliament? And then very closely tied in with that debate is one about the role of Parliament. So the significance of the Triennial Act, which is like the Triennial Act in the 1640s, where they had to have an election at least every 3 years. So the growth of parliamentary power, did that Triennial Act aid Parliament to become stronger? And the question that you'll look at there is, did Parliament become preeminent? So were they the most powerful force in the country, or was it still with the monarch? So those 2 debates go closely together. Did the monarch still have the power, or did the Parliament now hold the power? And actually that dynamic and that balance is what we've been really looking at all the way through. So at the beginning, obviously, Charles has pretty much all the power. That is then taken largely away from him in the 1640s and completely away from the monarchy during the 40s and up to, the 50s through to 1660. Then, of course, it's returned to the monarchy, although technically that has been brought back by the Parliament. So you could argue that it's a parliamentary controlled monarchy in some ways, if you look at the way that Charles II falls in line with his monarchy, with his Parliament, And then if you look at James, he starts to claw back a lot of that power away from the Parliament, and so it's a shift. And so what we need to think about is, did the Glorious Revolution achieve the goal of taking away some of that parliamentary power, taking away the power of the monarchy to give to the Parliament? So who ended up with most power at the end of this period of time, the monarch or the Parliament? The third debate is slightly different. This is to do with a financial revolution. So we look at William III's wars that he goes on. So there's a war in Ireland and Scotland fighting against James II, who tries to claim back his throne. And then he's got wars against France, the 9 Years' War. And so we're going to look at those and we're going to think about, was that a cause of a revolution in finance? So the way that or the way that Parliament and he controlled the money and how that changed. And then lastly, the Toleration Act of 1689, and thinking about how that changed religion and allowed for more dissent to take place. And did that end Anglican supremacy? So basically, was there still a confessional state after 1689? And that links back to what you've just been doing on the religion. So those are the 4 debates. Did the monarchy maintain control? Did the Parliament become the most powerful? How much did finance change and why? And was there still a confessional state or not? So on the next slide, I've put a few key ideas related to each of those things and a few of the key laws and acts that are introduced. So things like the Declaration Bill of Rights, which will be linked to the monarchy and Parliament's power. The Triennial Act. You've also got what was called the Rage of Party. So we talked a little bit about political parties emerging and thinking about how At this time, you're starting to get a shift away from what was called the court and country, so court being in with the king and country being opposition, towards the Whig and Tory political parties. And so those parties really start to become quite powerful at this time, and so the debate really is, did it matter which political party you were in which case Parliament's more powerful, or did it matter if you were court and country, in which case the monarch's still more powerful? So it was really about, do we still want to be in favour of the king, or do we want to be in a particular political party? And that helps you to understand the debate between the two in terms of who had most power. Then with the Financial Revolution, there's a number of acts. The Public Accounts Act, which is to do with William being much more open about his finances and honest with his Parliament. The Recoinage Act, the Civil List, which were all financial laws, and also the establishment of the Bank of England and the national debt, which is really interesting. So that was about providing opportunity for people who had quite a bit of money that wanted to lend money, and establishing that as basically that the king and the Parliament would borrow from people. So it's a safe way for people to lend money because it was underwritten by the Parliament. They were guaranteed a return of interest on what they had lent to the king, but it also helped the king and the Parliament because they then got money to borrow to spend on wars or whatever they needed to spend it on without having to raise taxes. So it kind of benefited everybody. People didn't get angry because they weren't paying more tax. People who wanted to lend money and make interest on that as a way of making a source of income could do so, and the king and the Parliament could get money. So that was something that through the Bank of England and the national debt was established at this time, which aided the growth of parliamentary and monarchical finances. And then lastly, you've got the Confessional State and the Toleration Act, and that one's a little bit standalone because it's more to do with religion than it is to do with the power aspect. But obviously the Anglican Church, as we've looked at throughout the whole of the political and religious sections, are very, very closely tied together. So this debate is actually quite interlinked in some ways with the political stuff, but it's a bit more separate than we've seen so far. On the next slide of the PowerPoint, there's a bit of a timeline. It hasn't got everything on there that you need, but it gives you a good overview of what happens, so that will help you revise this at the end of the section. There's a couple of example exam questions you can have a look at so you can see how they're structured. And then at the end, I've put a slide about historiographical schools of thought. Now, you don't have to learn this for the exam. You don't need to mention it in the exam, so it's a bit of extra knowledge, really. If it confuses you, just ignore it. But it does mention it in the textbook, and I didn't want you to be confused and not understand that, so I'll just do a quick explanation. But feel free to completely ignore this bit if you don't understand it. If you want to learn more about this, then check out the next video.